and should see a notification that the meeting is now currently being recorded. Okay. Well, let's see. And Jim, where are you? Jim, I'm going to unmute you so you don't have to worry about that later. I might be slightly distracted as a couple more people I got to admit on. It's either I got to click admit you in, or I have to make you enter in a passcode. I figure it's just easier if I just admit people as they log on. Okay. So I see the chat. I see people logging on here. Really appreciate it. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, everybody, thanks for logging on to the Metro Detroit Athletic Officials Association meeting for tonight. You know, I know a lot of us are double duty, triple duty, that kind of a thing throughout the season. And so I'm looking at all of us, and we either had one earlier or we had a night off. And so I appreciate everybody logging on their night off. We're going to talk about a couple of quick scenarios to get our brains kind of warmed up and thinking about basketball rules, situations, that kind of thing. But then we're going to get into talking about technical fouls, contentious situations and games, how to perhaps prevent them, how to respond to them despite our best efforts should they occur. And before we get into that, though, Bob Check is not going to be able to make it tonight. He's covering a game, but he did want me to ask everybody to please continue to update your arbiter calendars. As always, lots of individuals are affected with COVID, either through an illness or an exposure. And so situations, as he would be fond of saying, and is correct, things are very fluid. And so if we can help out the assigners by keeping our calendars up to date to avoid unnecessary turnbacks, I know he would greatly, and other assigners would greatly appreciate that. So one of the scenarios I first wanted to acknowledge, I wanted to give some street cred to Tim Anstedt. Last meeting, we were discussing when the arrow is pointed in the incorrect direction to the wrong team. At what point is it too late to turn the arrow back to the other team? And I had trouble, finding it in the case book, and Tim had emailed me later and was able to confirm that you can correct the arrow up and until the inbound has legally ended. So if you give the ball at the disposal of team A, and that's after a held ball, and the arrow is pointing in the direction of team A, but you realize while team A still has the ball at their disposal for a throw-in, that it should really be team B, that throw-in has not yet ended. You can blow your whistle, and you can then verify with the table and your partners and get that arrow pointed in the correct direction. And so that's something that we all kind of thought and we were fairly certain of and knew, but Tim was able to find that and confirm that for us with some case plays. Another situation, and Jim, this was something that I think I kind of asked you about during one game. It was basket interference. And basket interference, when somebody swipes at the net or perhaps tugs on the net a little bit. When is that basket interference and when is it not basket interference? And secondarily, how do you explain that to a coach in a timely fashion? This is something that happened to me. Ball hit the rim on a try for goal. It was up and above the rim, but it was not in contact with the rim. It was not in contact with the backboard. And somebody came by and gave a really good swipe at the net. Didn't touch the ball, didn't shake the rim, didn't tug on the rim or anything like that. And I knew it wasn't basket interference. But what I had trouble with was trying to explain to the coach real quickly why it wasn't basket interference. And I remember talking about it with Jim a little bit, and he explained that, in short, for that to be basket interference, the ball has to be on the rim. The ball has to be on the basket, the way it is worded in the definition of basket interference in Rule 4. And Jim, maybe
on the rim or in the basket, like, you know, in the net. If it's in the cylinder, to be basket interference, the interfering person has to touch the ball while it's in the cylinder. Touching the rim or the net would not be interference unless the ball is on the rim or in the basket.
Right. So that's the quickest and simplest way to explain it. You might see this a lot in lower level games when they're not able to quite get up high enough to make an attempt at the block above the rim, etc. But just know that if all of a sudden you have somebody that really takes a swipe of that net and you have everybody screaming at you that should be basket interference, you can kind of explain it that the ball's got to be on the rim or actually in the basket for that kind of action to be considered basket interference. That's the quickest way to explain it.
Yeah, let's move on from basket interference. I'm still aggravated because me and my crew missed one last night that was a bad one.
Well, you know, Jim, I think we all learn well from everyone and from other people's misery. Do you want to kind of explain what the situation was that happened? This will be therapy for you.
Yeah, so a guy was a player from Team A, was coming along the baseline from opposite the table to dunk. The defender from Team B came across the lane, went up to block the dunk. His hand went through the net just inside the rim. So the defender's hand was inside the basket, and he blocked the dunk from inside the basket. It was right next to the rim, and I didn't see where his hand was. You know, I'm looking at, from my angle as the C on the side the player was coming from, I'm just looking at contact and foul. And for the life of me, until after the game, I didn't realize that we had missed it. And when someone said that to me, and I had no clue. But if you look at the Detroit News today, there's some photos, and there's one plain as day where the guy's fingers are just inside the rim, you know, and that's where the block occurred.
So, Jim, who is looking at that action in a three-person mechanic?
Well,
who's got that?
Normally, on a basket interference or goaltending call, it's going to be the center of the trail looking at it, and particularly whoever's opposite the side the shot is coming from will usually have the best view. In this particular situation, on a dunk block shot, I would suggest that the lead, who's looking at the contact, is probably in the best position to see the hand through the net. Usually it's not on basket interference or goaltending. It's one of the other people, but the lead is right there. You know, if they're close to the lane line anyway, they're going to be looking up and see, you know, the defender's hand, the rim, and the ball all right there. But really, everyone's responsible for it. But yeah.
Because in normal training, as a lead, you are taught to be looking at that body contact. You're taught to be looking below the rim. But in certain circumstances, like we're also all taught, if it's obvious, if it's a crew saver, and if you see it, you know, come get it. The old saying is, don't go fishing for minnows in somebody else's pond, but if you see a whale, go ahead and go get it.
And this is a one situation too, because if you're officiating in your area and you're the lead, you're looking at the shot block and you are going to be looking up, at the rim, the ball and the defender's hand right there. Normally, your goaltending and basket interference, don't normally occur on dunks. They're more typically on, tip-ins, jump shots, short jump shots, where there's some distance, between the ball and, the rim when the shot's released. But that's the one situation on a dunk where the lead would be looking there.
And Jim, I am sorry, I did have to pull it
Yeah.
up and share it. And this was that scenario where in a still photo, it's clear as day, but in those situations where it's bang, bang, you kind of, it can be tough to catch sometimes. It's super quick.
Yeah, didn't sleep well over that.
Yep.
Tough one to miss in a first place game, and that was a 2-point game.
Yeah. And we all have those. We all have those. So I appreciate you sharing and talking us through it. So does anybody have, before we kind of get into the meat of the conversation, does anybody have any questions or comments on those particular rules or kinds of situations or scenarios before we move along? And while we're waiting for any responses, if you joined us a little late, please type in your name and MHSA ID number into the chat section for attendance purposes. And for everybody who is joining, the meeting is being recorded. Okay. Hearing none, we'll move along to the meat of the conversation. So we were talking about what to discuss today, and COVID-19 the last couple of years has, kind of upset the rhythm of the basketball season a little bit. But typically speaking, towards the end of January, beginning of February, through, I would say, mid-February, depending upon whether we're talking boys or girls, because their seasons are offset by a week. This can be that time of year where frustrations tend to come out from players, coaches, parents, and us as officials even. We're all working probably more than we ever have, and we're not immune from it. Coaches are dealing with things more than they normally have to this time of year. So there's usually this window period that is not unusual where you can very often see that frustration spill over onto the court. Somebody is famously for saying, the coaches, are upset with the parents are upset with the coaches because they don't think their kids get enough playing time. The kids are upset with the coaches because they don't think they're doing as well as they should. And then of course, everybody hates us, kind of a thing. And so we need to know how to respond to these kinds of situations. And there's some techniques, some tricks that you can do to perhaps diffuse the situations. But when it comes to technical fouls, intentional fouls, flagrant fouls, it is not a failing if we have to call one of those, despite our best efforts to try to manage the situation. They're like anything else. They're like any other foul in the rule book. They're a tool at our disposal to administer when the situation calls for it. And so we want to be ready for when those kinds of situations happen. How do we respond to them? And so the first thing I just want to talk about is, before we get into some technical foul situations, want to talk about the difference between, briefly, intentional fouls and flagrant fouls, because I think a lot that you might have to deal with is a lot of people are used to watching college basketball. And you hear flagrant 1, flagrant 2, and you might even work with some other officials who officiate collegiate level basketball, and they might sometimes bring that down to the high school level. But from a high school rule standpoint, There is no flagrant one. There's no flagrant two. We have intentional fouls and we have flagrant fouls. And Jim, I thought we could start off with just real quickly. Do you happen to have the verbal or the written definition of an intentional foul in front of you?
Yeah, intentional fouls. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to get into, what we're talking about, which is, one for excessive contact, because there are many types of intentional fouls. But one that we're talking about here at this time of year is when the exact language is excessive contact with an opponent while the ball is live or until an airborne shooter returns to the floor. So, the fouls is a little bit harder than it needs to be to stop the play. Examples, might be, going to block a shot, but, really hitting the guy pretty hard from behind on, say, a breakaway layup. That could be an intentional foul, even if there's an attempt to play the ball. An intentional foul with no attempt, a foul with no attempt to play the ball is plainly going to be at least an intentional foul. But even if they're trying to play the ball, but just drill that airborne shooter a little harder than they need to, that could be an intentional foul.
Yeah.
One that you see not quite as often, but you see it in games, is a guy just drills a screener intentionally. If the screen's being set, instead of trying to go around, just puts his shoulder down and drills the guy, or throws an elbow at a screener on the way by. Those are other, what I'll say, excessive contact intentional fouls.
So I meant to ask a question in the for a survey as far as how many people have ever called it an intentional or flagrant foul. But intentional fouls, those kinds of situations that you brought up, imagine a scenario where you are the trail and you're transitioning to a lead and somebody just got their pocket picked and you're hustling back because there's that breakaway layup, and you can kind of have your radar up because all of a sudden that defender you can see it. They're mad that they got the ball stolen and they're coming for that guy. And don't anticipate the call, but anticipate the play. And you need to have your radar up for, is he making a really good, hard, clean attempt at the ball? And you can have hard foul without it being intentional. I think the key word is excessive. And very often you might come up with an intentional foul and the coach will say, they were playing the ball. How is that an intentional foul? And you have to say, coach, it can either be an intentional act or excessive contact above that of a regular common foul. And the other tip, when you have that and you are that calling official, the mechanics are foul, hand up, extended above your hand with a fist, signify that you have a foul, but you do not have to go right away to signal an intentional foul. You can pause and you can think about it. And if you have a good partner or partners, one of them will come by and it might be that right time of the game to call an intentional foul to make sure everybody knows we're not going to deal with this anymore. And you can be a good partner and you can come over and say, hey, Jim, that looked pretty bad. I would support you if you had an intentional foul on that. What are you thinking? And then let your partner process that. And then when they walk to the table, 34, then they can go up with an intentional foul. Or they can just come up with 34, push, and they can make that decision. But it doesn't have to be an immediate choice. So intentional fouls, Jim, after you have made the decision that it is an intentional foul, how do we administer that?
Well, an intentional foul is going to be 2 shots for the fouled player. with the lane cleared. And when I say the lane cleared, let me get rid of a common misconception. When you're shooting intentional foul shots or a technical foul, the players don't have to be on the other side of midcourt. They just can't be on the lane line, below the lane line or inside the 3-point arc. They just that you're just clearing the lane. They don't need to be at midcourt. But it's 2 shots, and then the ball for the fouled team at the inbound spot closest to the foul. Different than a technical foul where the inbound is going to be at midcourt opposite the table. Intentional foul, it's going to be at the out of bounds spot closest to the foul.
Yep. And that's pretty much it for an intentional foul. The other situation that you very often, this is a tough one. This is probably in many ways a tougher intentional foul to call. At the end of a game, they're trying to stop the clock. And so they're going to foul that ball handler. The MHSAA wants you, if they reach out and they tug that jersey and they pull that jersey out, that should, by rule, be called an intentional foul. And that's something that when you're in a situation, maybe at the timeout or when you see somebody trying to make that foul call, you can say, hey, go ahead, foul them, but make an attempt at the ball too at the same time. And we don't just want people grabbing, tugging that jersey to stop the clock. If you are in a quarterfinal at Callahan Hall, or if you're in that regional final or something along those lines, and that jersey gets ripped out and you come up with just a common foul without an intentional foul, that's not what the MHSAA and everybody wants. In those kinds of situations, we do want them to be intentional fouls. Use your common sense with that. As always, game time, situation, scenario where you are. But if you call that intentional foul, in almost all circumstances, you're going to be supported.
Yeah, the good rule of thumb is when you know they're trying to foul, call the first foul, and even if it's a light attempt at a foul, call it before it turns into a harder foul or a shirt grab or something that you'll have to call intentional.
Before it escalates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Question on intentional fouls.
Yeah.
Sure.
So if an attempt for the basket's being made and you have an intentional foul, then there's two shots that are awarded. So in effect, is there any penalty for having an intentional foul versus a regular foul? Wouldn't that be the same award in that situation?
Well, it's 2 shots and the ball.
And possession
so
of the
they
ball.
get the
Okay,
ball
I get
back.
that.
But the other thing too is if the shot goes in, where if it was an ordinary foul, you just have an and one and a free throw, it's a good basket plus 2 shots and the ball out of bounds.
That was my
So
second
there is a
question. Thank you.
difference.
Yep, that's a good question.
Thank you.
So very briefly, if everybody, so the question is, what about in cases where you have an offensive foul, player plowing through a screen, and you call an offensive foul? I believe this is probably in most situations, if we have an illegal screen or if we have an offensive foul and it's just deemed a common personal foul, even if we're in the bonus or something along those lines, you would not shoot the 1-1 because team possession is in the offensive hand. If it's an intentional foul, if it's deemed an intentional foul and the offensive team has possession of the ball, it's my understanding, and anybody can correct me if I'm wrong, that that player who was fouled, if it was an intentional foul, if it was that elbow on a screen or something that doesn't rise to the level of flagrant, but intentional, it's my understanding that even though the offensive team had possession, team control status, that individual who was fouled would still get 2 shots and possession of the ball closest and nearest to where the foul occurred. So Jim, I think now that we're talking about intentional fouls, I think now we want to maybe move on to what's the difference between an intentional foul and a flagrant foul and how to kind of address those situations.
All right, well, taking out the rule, a flagrant foul may be personal or technical foul of a violent or excessive nature, or a technical non-contact foul, but which displays unacceptable conduct. It may or may not be intentional. If personal, it involves but is not limited to violent contact such as striking, kicking, and kneeing. If technical, it involves dead ball contact or non-contact at any time, which is extreme or persistent, vulgar, or abusive conduct. Fighting is a flagrant act. So let's just talk about excessive contact and how you would elevate it and distinguish between an intentional foul and elevating it to a flagrant foul. And we're not talking about fighting right now, but just a play in the game that is, one you have to distinguish between flagrant or excessive and make that call. And it's important to know because a flagrant foul includes an ejection. And let me give an example from a girls' basketball game I had earlier this month, where one of the big girls grabbed a rebound on the defensive team and was immediately surrounded, by the team that just shot, to trap her. And they were right on top of her, and she, panicked and threw an elbow. And the lead official, my partner, promptly called a foul on the player and immediately, shouted out, flagrant. And I'm looking at it and thinking, well, I'm not sure that was flagrant. It was of a point where to me, it was differentiating between just a player control foul and an intentional foul, didn't rise to the level where you're thinking flagrant, intentional versus flagrant. And of course, I was the R in that game and thinking, oh crap, paperwork. And he came up to me immediately because he realized he probably shouldn't have said flagrant. He didn't mean to say flagrant, but he did. And he came up, Jim, can you help me out? And I go, you meant to say intentional, didn't you? And he said, yeah. And he, just changed it right away, gave the signal for intentional, which then brought the coach of that girl's team down, from in terms of anger, from like a 12 to a 3, about the call. And thinking about differentiating that, if you throw an elbow and hit someone in the chest and there's not a huge effect, probably intentional. You throw it and hit someone of the neck or above, that's probably flagrant. And I think you have to look a little bit at the result of what happens from the contact. And if it is the type of contact that's going to cause a serious injury risk, and an elbow to the neck or head is a little more serious than an elbow, to someone's torso, in most cases. And that's where I think you'd elevate it up to a flagrant foul.
Going along with that same kind of scenario, intentional versus flagrant, imagine that same scenario. Defensive player gathers the rebound, they kind of get swarmed and trapped. There's an elbow. You can sometimes have that elbow, but another situation is, did that person, when they had that elbow hit, did the elbow swing independent of the torso, or was it just somebody kind of pivoting? And there was no like super hard, intent there. But I think whether it's intentional or flagrant, I think the same rule applies. You don't have to always come up with an immediate decision. You can take a moment, take a breath, consult with your partners, because as Jim said, Intentional versus a flagrant foul. Flagrant, that player is ejected from that game and for the next game.
Yeah, in that case, my partner, like I say, as soon as he said the word flagrant, he realized, ooh, I'm not sure I should have said that. And you know, and came to, you know, me because I was the closest partner to him, you know, looking for help. And I knew exactly what he, you know, what he wanted. And it diffused, we came up with, I think, the right result. No one really argued with it.
Flagrants, a good way of looking at them, are non-basketball plays. You know, sometimes they might be a basketball play, but the outcome is very severe. But in most instances, I would say that flagrant foul starts off as a non-basketball play in most instances. So with that said, I kind of want to shift gears. If everybody's good on intentional versus a flagrant. Oh, and I'm sorry. One last point I want to clarify. How do we administer a flagrant foul?
It's same as an intentional. It's 2 shots and the ball at the spot closest to the foul. The other aspect, though, of course, is the player is ejected and they have to leave the bench area and go to the locker room, you know, provided that there's someone from, you know, his team, an administrator or assistant coach or, you know, some adult that will accompany him to the locker room. They can't stay on the bench.
Yeah. All right. So I want to talk, I want to transition now to technical fouls and dealing with those situations. And again, there's lots of philosophies around technical fouls. I've heard some people pride themselves on never calling a technical foul. There have been other people, they'll go nameless, who might pride themselves on calling plenty of technical fouls. But the point is I think there's a middle ground where we all should feel comfortable in calling a technical foul and calling it and administering it like any other fouls, emotionally, mentally, etc. And you know, most technical fouls that we're going to call are going to be they're going to be non-contact in nature in most situations. I think the one exception might be during a dead ball where somebody walks up to somebody and gives them a light shove or something like that. But most of the time it's going to be a non-contact situation. And I think when we're talking about technical fouls, I've heard some people say that came out of nowhere, or intentional that came out of nowhere. And honestly, it's a rare scenario where it truly comes out of nowhere. You might think it came out of nowhere, but there was usually something going on that maybe we just didn't see or we didn't catch. And Jim, I don't know if you have anything else that you kind of want to give as a preamble, but I thought we could transition to a couple of in-game video scenarios that I have from a recent situation, and we could talk them through it, and you can talk about what we did well in administering it and what we maybe could have improved upon.
Yeah, go ahead to the video.
All right. So I'm going to do a quick share screen here. And let's just X out of that.
Yeah, we don't need to see that anymore.
We don't need to see that anymore. Let me get out of here. Okay, so this was a game that I was working, a JV game, and this is the two teams. If you recognize the two teams, if you recognize the other official, I guess keep the comments generic as best as you can, because again, this is being recorded. But this is in the first quarter. And when you're watching video on stream, I know it's going to look a little choppy, but the action on the court is not necessarily what is going to be helpful. And so I'm going to do a lot of pausing and we're going to break it down. So what you're going to see is Hold on, let me mute that. You don't need to hear it. This gentleman, he's just going to drive. He's going to take a shot. He's going to miss. All right. Now, right now, I've paused this so you should be able to see this. I want you to keep an eye on 33 gold here and 22 blue as they come up the court. And I'll pause it when it's time. And by the way, that's me looking very athletic. All right. Now, right there, that contact was fairly light. First quarter JV game. This is my partner's second of the night. This is my first of two that night. And so we're thinking, okay, we'll let them play through that. That was a little bit more severe contact right there. And again, you might not necessarily be able to see it very well at transitioning from the video through the stream, but I'm telling you, it's going to be a little bit more severe. That's one that, had we called, probably would have been a good thing, but we didn't. So 22 blue gives the ball up. Now, what ends up happening here is 33 gold just starts to hug him. And now I'm kind of looking at this. There wasn't much action here. This is a two-person mechanic. I could have maybe started to glance up here because my partner's got 6 players. He's thinking closely guarded. He's got the back court to pay attention to. He's wondering, what are these two guys over there? He's got sideline to worry about. And he's looking through a couple players right here. And 33 gold's kind of hugging him and hugging him and hugging him. And you can see 22 blue kind of shrug off 33 gold and kind of get kind of upset. I didn't see that because, again, my eyes are kind of looking over here, technically my primary coverage area, but there's not too much going on. I could have probably brought my eyes over here to help out a little bit. So what ends up going is not too much else kind of going on. They pass the ball. They end up putting up a shot. Just give it a second here. Don't worry about if it's looking choppy. I'll stop it if anything interesting happens. All right. 22 blue ends up grabbing the rebound, puts it back up, and it's going to go in. The ball is going to fall and drop right in his hands. And he's going to hold the ball there by his chest. And I start to put air in my whistle for delay a game. And the next thing I know, this happens. And I'll let it play to see if you can see it, what unfolds. He grabs it. He sticks it in the chest face area of 33 gold. And 33 gold grabs it and throws it at him off of his back, off of his head. And so I went from, I'm going to call delay a game, to now I'm going to call a technical foul on 22 blue. Oh, and now I got 33 gold throwing the ball back at 22 blue. And so now I have a technical foul on 33 gold, a double technical foul. And there I am calling 22 blue for a technical foul, and I'm saying 33 gold as well. And my brain during this period is processing all of this at the same time. And I'm thinking double technical foul, how do we administer it back in? And by the way, this was a Friday after a very long week at work. And I tell you that to say that we are not immune from emotion as officials as well. And this, I think, Jim, is a great example of, we probably could have had a couple early common fouls and that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you with that first foul we saw in the backcourt, that first contact. I probably would have passed on it too at this point in the game, but the one that occurred, just after the, just into the front court, that one probably could have been gotten and might have diffused this situation. You might never have had any anger, but you missed that contact. So then the one guy hugs the other and, things sort of, snowball.
Yep. And I'm going to tell you, as a lead, when I didn't see that initial action contact, I was like, where did this come from? But clearly it came from somewhere. Yeah. And again, so this first,
I was going to say, in a 3-man crew, probably someone calls that. In a 2-man crew, I can see easily why, neither Shane nor his partner would get that. it's way out of Shane's primary area, and his partner's got, you know, on ball coverage with a defender, you know, guarding the ball handler. So you
Now,
might not get that.
now, one thing I do want to highlight that I did not do well here is, again, long week. You maybe couldn't quite see it, but I emphatically pointed to each player because my level of frustration is already starting to go up a little bit. And so I just start reporting the fouls. And now my partner's coming over here. I'm looking at it through, I'm seeing the Zoom screen here, but he's coming in. He's probably like, okay, hold on, what's going on? Normally what you're taught, which I did not do here, is I needed to walk over to my partner and say, I got double technical fouls. We're going to have a point of interruption. It's going to be there. What you want to do is, even if it's a single technical foul, you want to just walk over to one of your partners or your other partner if it's two-person, tell them what you got. They can start getting people lined up. They can start helping you administer the thing. I didn't. I just start reporting the table because I'm kind of upset and I just want to get the game rolling. And my partner just wants to come over and help, you know, assess the situation. And I was only communicating with the table. And I was not communicating with him.
Yeah, one thing I would say here is, you know, you're both at this point kind of close to the table with the players all behind you. And normally, you know, you want to back off, I'd say, you know, to at least the center circle so the players are in front of you. Because sometimes this situation might escalate further, you know, where those two might go at it. Now, you can see four of the players on the goal team are in front of their bench by their coach. But there's one player, you know, behind the officials, and we can't tell on the video how far apart, you know, the blue team is, but you want to try to keep the players all in your field of view so nothing else happens.
Jim, hold that thought. That's a wonderful segue.
Yeah.
All right. So now we're the same game. We're going to fast forward in time. It's the third quarter, and I don't remember exactly what time of the third quarter it is, but I say it's about probably mid third quarter. And so the same situation is going to happen. I'm going to let the tape roll. What I want you to do is I want you to look at now 23 blue and 3 gold. And what I'm going to say here is we've all had, I think, this situation where maybe you see a couple, and I'm going to describe it as a couple of kids playing patty cake up and down the court, and you're just waiting for that dead ball or that right opportunity to blow your whistle, stop the play, and just say, guys, cut it out. Because your other option is you're going to give both double personals, double texts, or that kind of thing. But you have to, as an official, this is why you get paid the big bucks. Are you going to just talk to them, or are you going to have to adjudicate something? So kind of watch it if you can. And you can see a little shove off there, a little shove off back, another shove a little harder. And I probably, at that moment, as the ball's being inbounded, I probably could have just blown my whistle and talked to him right then and there. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to see if they would back away from each other. And I wanted to just kind of maybe address it in a half beat, another shove there. And now they're still kind of, see, 3 golds got that hop in his step, and now, it's kind of on, that kind of a thing. And they're still playing patty cake. And then the ball goes out of bounds. There's a call here by my partner, and you can see where I am. And I'm at half court, and I have it in my head at next dead ball. I'm going to come in, I'm going to talk to him. I probably could have come in with a little more zest to get there. And as you'll see, I'm coming, but I'm not coming fast enough. I didn't blow my whistle. I didn't draw attention to it. And so now the action that was over here continues. And 3 gives a good little shove, and 23 blue is playing the victim. Oh, what's going on? Kind of a thing. And I knew 23 blue wasn't innocent either. So now what I do here is what I should have done earlier is I try to get them over here, and I wanted to have a conversation with them by the bench area, by the scores table, so the coaches could both hear me telling them to knock it off. And so I'm trying to get them both to come over here. And you see 3 goals pointing at this, 23 Blues saying something back at him. And let me just say, it wasn't pleasantries anymore. And I didn't even get a chance to tell him to knock it off before it got just really vulgar. And I decided to just say, okay, I can't talk you guys out of that anymore. Double text for both of you, double technical foul for each of you now. Now, this is where we definitely could have been better. And by the way, this is my second double tech of the night. This is now the 3rd quarter. This gentleman right here to the right with the white stripe on his arm, he's the head coach. This other gentleman is the assistant coach. Sometimes you have coaches, they can go anywhere from being very helpful to being your ally in these tough situations to being neutral. They're not going to really make a difference. They're not going to hurt you nor help you, or they're going to just make things worse. I would say we had a bit of the latter two in this case. So I'm going to let it play on and continue a little bit. See, the head coach, he's doing the smart thing. He knows to get that player out of there before it gets any worse. This other gentleman, kind of keep an eye on him. Now, what did I do again? My partner's over here is just wondering what's going on. And I'm just wanting to report to the table and get things rolling. And I needed to slow down. And so my back's turned, his back's turned to most of the players because, again, he just wants to know what's going on. And I start reporting. And Jim, are we in good position to keep an eye on?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about probably the best thing to do would have been for, Shane to call his partner over and have this conversation out on the court where the players are all between them and the benches. Now, nothing bad has happened behind them, but you want to always try to keep the players in your field of view. And it's probably a good idea. It is a good idea, not probably. It is a good idea with a situation like this to talk to your partner before you report, just to sort things out. And,
I'm going to say, Jim,
I can appreciate what happened here because I'm now Shane's on at least 4 technical fouls in his first of 2 games at the same site. He's not endearing himself to the crowd, and he just wants to get this over with and get on to the varsity game.
my blood pressure's up.
Yeah, but particularly here, you've got a younger, less experienced official. It's a good opportunity for us as veteran officials, to help teach the younger partners and have that conversation, out in the middle of the court before you go and report. So you could, tell your partner, all right, I've got a technical foul on, blue, what was his number, 23 or 22, and gold 3 or whatever it was. We've got double technical fouls, so we're not going to be shooting. It's going to go with the ball's going to be, put in play at the point of interruption, which I forget what it even was. It was the ball just out of bounds.
But again, that's another one of the situations you walk through. Okay, point of interruption, whose ball, what did you have, that kind of thing. I'm going to let it continue. All right. Now, 33 Gold, who was one of the people from the other double technical foul, is trying to do the right thing, it looks like. All right. Now, again, right now, we've got 10 players and 2 coaches, and no one is paying attention to them. I'm going to let it continue. Now they start clapping. And now 33 Gold, who thought he was going to be helpful, all of a sudden starts to not be helpful. And so now you got this antagonistic clapping going on, and now you got 33 Gold starting to approach the other team doing his antagonistic clapping back. And the worst part about it is neither my partner nor myself know kind of who started what, because we were not in good position. And 33 Gold gets right up into their huddle. And, you know, this is not good.
And two of the coaches now, instead of, watching after their players, have turned their attention to the officials, when all this happened on top of it.
And so my partner goes to do the right thing and just starts separating people. When this kind of thing happens, if you're not exactly sure what's going on, who started what, that kind of thing, get people separated. And see, now the coach who was doing the right thing, now he's upset at the other team, the other player. He thinks they've been disrespected. He thinks, wait a second, the officials aren't taking care of this. I need to take care of this. And now I got the assistant coach, he did this, he did that, and I didn't see anything because my partner nor I were in great position to see it.
Let me add a couple things here too, which, I don't know what was said by the head coach, but coaches on a team really should never talk or lecture the players on the other team. Just shouldn't happen. They got to pay attention to their own team. And
you can tell them that.
Yeah.
Say, coach, take care of your team. And now we're trying to get them back into their huddle. And 44 is lingering, they're lingering, and now we're just trying to get everybody separated as best we can. And now the gentleman who I remember I said they can either be helpful, they can be neutral, or they cannot be helpful. And again, I'm focusing on this, and it looks like I'm looking this way, but I am so zeroed in on what's going on in my head. I'm still at level 11 out of 10. It's amazing, but I'm looking at this and I still don't remember seeing that with my eyes, even though I'm watching it on film, and it looks like I should be seeing exactly what's going on. And the assistant coach, again, this behavior by this coach is deserving of a technical foul, which we did not assess. And I would even argue as an assistant coach, it's deserving potentially of a flagrant technical foul. He is not helping the situation, and he arguably, it would have been more helpful to have him remove the game possibly. Jim, I don't know what your thought.
I mean, it could be, but certainly at least a technical. You saw, number 3 on Gold, pointing at the assistant coach and shouting at him, but that's on the adult. The adults have to be adults, and that assistant coach kind of instigated whatever the player on Gold said back to him.
And so now this gentleman down here, Jim, is the head coach for the Gold team. And so now he sees this action by this coach, and so now he's thinking he has to start to take matters into his own hands. And so now my partner, again, my partner's at a level of emotion below me. I'm just going to be upfront and honest about that. As soon as my partner started to address the assistant coach and get him back in his huddle, I was like, oh yeah, there's an assistant coach standing there talking to somebody he shouldn't be talking to. And my partner gets him back over there. And now the head coach is doing now the right thing and chastising the assistant coach, as he should. But you can see the body language of the coach in Gold, like, what, we just going to allow that? And so now the head coach has now turned his attention back to the players. That's where you want the coach's attention, back to policing their own players. And usually all you have to do is remind them of that. But I was not in a state of mind, unfortunately, this night to do that. And so now we have a conversation. We try to figure it out. I'm going to jump ahead here a little bit. All right. So now again, double technical fouls. We got out of that situation. It was not handled as best as we could. I'm going to jump ahead 5 minutes in the video. And you can see kind of what happens next here. Bear with me. All right. Okay, so now this is not that long after it. And what we are both thinking in our heads, and you can sometimes communicate this with your partners, where you can feel sometimes those games, it's like, all right, it doesn't matter if we're going to be here all night. You just got to start locking it down. And so sometimes as an official, you might kind of have like a signal or something, or you kind of give that look, or if there's an opportunity, you can verbally say, all right, guys, be on top of this one. And again, I don't worry if it looks choppy right now. I'll kind of narrate it. Blue passes the ball around a little bit up top. Blue 34 catches the ball here. He is going to get fouled. I forget who we called the personal foul on. It was harder action, but not intentional, not flagrant or anything like that. Now I'm going to let the play continue. And foul, we're both coming in. We got it good. 34 Gold loses his balance. He was just a little clumsy. I didn't realize he had only lost his balance. He had lost his balance. He had kind of run into the blue player, and I had interpreted it because I didn't think he lost his balance. I thought he was getting in the face of the blue player. And so I come in and I'm going to call a technical foul on 34 Gold, because again, I'm keeping, you know, we have a short trigger now. And 33 Gold comes in, and then he now is the aggressor, and he gets in the face of 34 Blue, and, or excuse me, 34 Blue, and who I thought had a technical foul. In reality, he didn't. I still called him for one. That's on me. He's trying to get hold 33 Gold back. And so now in my head, I've got a technical foul on 34 Gold, a technical foul on 33 Gold for piling on top, so to speak. And 34 Blue is kind of out of the picture. And my partner and I, we get in and we just start trying to separate everybody. And now 33 Gold, I think at this time has realized he has just gotten his second technical foul, and he is no longer going to be playing this game. That head turn, that's when he realized it. And so now what we're trying to do is what we should have done in the other situation. We're just trying to get everybody separated. And my partner comes over here, the person who was fouled, he's doing the right thing. He's trying to keep him from going over there, and we're just trying to get everybody back to their benches. Now, this coach right here, this is the varsity head coach, by the way. You see, he's motioning his team to get over here. This is the head JV coach. He's motioning his team to get over here. That's good. And so now, hold on here, camera's moving. My partner and I, Jim, would you argue that this is a better position than we were in before?
Much better. I mean, you're between the teams, and if they're going to go at each other, they're probably going to go in front of you, and you'll see them if they try to get around behind you.
Yep. All right. So again, there's not a lot of action. My partner, who again, I'm going to give him some street cred here. And again, one of the varsity officials who I was working with that night, he kind of came in after this and he said, "What happened? you looked so upset for the remainder of that, kind of fourth quarter. He could see it on my face, even through the mask. And my partner is helping me calm down a little bit and kind of walk through the scenario. We're trying to figure out what we got. We have a personal foul on gold, technical foul on gold, another technical foul on gold. This player here is waiting to check in for the player who is disqualified. And so now we approach the table to adjudicate the situation. Both teams are separated. There's no one behind us. I'm going to let it keep going on. I get my signals, this or that. He's got 2 free throws. I turn the sound off, but the crowd is kind of going crazy because they realize how many free throws Blue is going to shoot. And this coach is just wanting an explanation. I'm going to report it, and I am going to come over, and I'm going to, because he was calm. He just wanted to know what was going on. And my partner is saying, all right, this is what we got. Coach just wants to know what's going on. I'm explaining to him the situation. And once I explain the situation to him, he accepts it. He accepts it. He knows we're trying to keep a lid on it. He was a level-headed individual. And, he's like, okay. And so now, while we're going on, I'm just going to let it run. We're figuring out who's shooting which free throws. And again, as we administer this, by rule, you administer the fouls and the free throws in the order in which they occur. So the player who was fouled in the act of shooting, he has 2 lanes clear. And then we have 4 technical free throws, and anybody can shoot those, at any time. Now, Gold at the time was sitting on the bench, and I just wanted to get them back onto the court, by rule, that kind of a thing. And again, I'm going to talk about positioning here. While 34 Blue is shooting free throws, I'm leaning up against the table. The table's asking me a question. I don't know if they were asking, I don't remember if they were asking me, who do I think the Detroit Lions is going to draft first or second or something like that. But what you see here is we're in good shape. I'm monitoring this. They're over here. And again, you can shoot free throws. They're behind the extended line free throw, behind the 3-point line. This is fine. This is all good positioning. 2 teams are separated. We're good. No problem, right? I'm watching. I turn my back for 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 for 1,000. I turn my back for literally 3 seconds. And watch what starts to happen here. 34 Blue approaches them, starts to say something, and then all of a sudden there's 3 Blue players with the entire Gold team there, and all of a sudden that talk isn't good, and I turn around and I realize it, and I'm like, guys, get back over here. And you can see my body language. I'm like, what are we doing? Stop it. But I turn my back. I shouldn't have turned my back. My partner is administering the free throws. He needs to pay attention to that. I need to be policing the situation up here. And I didn't. And again, the head coach, who, had I been more engaged, I could have said, hey, thanks. Keep on top of your team. We're going to help take care of this. But I'm not going to play it because you can't really hear it. But what ends up happening is that player who had been ejected for 2 technical technical fouls screams from the bench, why don't you call a bleeping technical foul on them? And this is me having reported his 3rd technical foul. But again, what am I doing? I didn't let my partner know. I didn't communicate. I didn't slow down. And, yes, you can, if you get 5 personal fouls, you can get a technical foul on top of that. You can get 2 technical fouls. If you're still on the bench area, you can get a 3rd one. Well, eventually, while they're shooting free throws, one of the game administrators comes over, takes that player, and you'll see him exit across the screen, removes him I didn't ask for them to do that, but they came over and he had taken off his jersey. He had thrown it into the stands, and he's getting them out of there. Now, that is kind of it for that situation. And Jim, I don't have really, I'll stop screen sharing here just for a moment. I don't have anything else to add about those situations, but I really felt obliged to kind of share that scenario with all of us and talk it through. And we're a little past our time, and I apologize for that, but I think it was worthwhile. Real quickly, Jim, we talked about how to prevent it. What can you do to de-escalate situations, and how can you better adjudicate it? We kind of talked through some of those things, but once you have an ejection, once you have a flagrant foul, once you have those situations, writing reports. And reports do not, everybody's like, oh, now, and, you know, Jim commented on earlier, now I got to do paperwork. In reality, we joke about that. It's not too onerous. And there's some tips to writing a good report. And Jim, you want to kind of just briefly go into what some of those good tips are?
Yeah, first I'll say, Shane, you have on the website, you have like a link to report writing too for people to look at. Isn't that the case?
I absolutely do. And let me show you how to get to it real quickly. So again, our website, MetroDetroitAthleticOfficials.com. You go to basketballs, you click basketball on the phone, or if you do the drop down box, I put it right there on top, fights. And on that page is a point of emphasis from the MHSAA, which is still relevant today for what to do among fights among opposing teams, how to write a report and the consequences of fighting tool. Let's just open up the how to write a report.
Yeah. Now the report, if you log into MHSA.com and log in, under your name, there is a section for reports. And it has drop down menus, and maybe Shane's going there right now, where you can fill in, things like, it'll help you fill in things like the names of the schools, the names and ID numbers of the crew members. And it'll ask you information like, there it is, official reports. Actually, Shane, you can show your report if you want.
Yep. Here's the wonderful thing. Once you submit a report for good sportsmanship or bad, you can search them all up. And so here's the one that I report, for this one. And it's going to ask you, was it an ejection? Was it result? What was the season, the sport, the time, the school, who's the opposing school, the date. When you eject somebody, walk over to the table and say, I need the name of that player for the report. Please write it on a scrap piece of paper for me. And
I have sometimes forgotten to get the name, but I get the number, and I write a report with a number and not a name. I've done that, but you should get the name and the number.
Yeah. And so when you're writing a report, it's really important, and we'll go back to this report writing guide. Keep it simple. No pontificating. What was it, Joe Friday from that old TV show, Just the Facts, ma'am, kind of a thing. Use simple language. This is not a time to go deep into your essay book, SAT book. Use good grammar, properly formed paragraphs. And here's the thing. This is one that a lot of people don't like to do, but a quote is a quote. If somebody literally uses the full language to go F yourself, or, they use vulgarity, you type it out. You don't put in an ampersand or, any other kind of symbols to imply what was. You write it word for word what that quote was.
Yeah, and let's just say if he calls another player a motherfucker, write the word motherfucker in there. I mean, I'm not being, say it. We're adults. And the people need to know exactly what was said, you know, who are looking at these reports.
Yep. Yep. I love it. I'll mark the video on YouTube now for kids now. So, but Jim's right. Jim's absolutely right. She got a question.
Yes.
Ian,
So
sorry.
if you're in a situation where it is getting a little bit out of control, you're in a JV game with two officials, you're calling a foul, you have to talk to the bench, and you know, guys can get intermixed and it's tough to keep track of.
Mhm.
Would you as officials look weak or strong if you call the timeout saying, this is my timeout, I need both teams to go to their benches until we figure this out?
Yeah, I would say
Would
you don't
that
have to say there's a timeout. You can just tell the teams, go to your benches. Coach, get your team to the bench and tell them to do that, and then take as much time as you need to sort it out. They can't start playing until you know, administer, you know, whatever is next. They can't start the
if you
game
have
until you're ready to start.
you have multiple responsibilities where your eyes have to be multiple places. So, you know, I appreciate you showing this, and it was obviously a troublesome game, but I wouldn't. There were situations that were tough for anybody to handle there, and you only have four eyes to watch all of that activity. Okay, thank you.
And
Yeah,
to
you
your
got
point,
you
Jim,
got to do the best you can.
yeah. I don't think you look weak if you just tell the teams to get over there. I think if anything, it looks like you're taking control of the situation, and you're managing the situation. You're on top of it. But when you write a report, I mean, just basic kind of things. Keep it accurate, keep it simple, keep it to the point, proofread, keep a copy for your records. And the nice thing about it on the MHS website, it it saves it for you. And if you can remember I'll use this as an example. I couldn't remember exactly in the third quarter when this happened, but I just said during the third quarter, Waterford Mott player, fouled hard in the act of shooting. After the foul is called, number 34 steps towards Mott player, number 23, and in my words, gets in his face and receives a technical foul. Now, again, looking at a film, he just tripped. You know, he was a little clumsy. He wasn't trying to be unsportsmanlike. As that is occurring, number 33 for the other team approaches number 23. And again, this is just factual stuff. This is just what happened. Unsportsmanlike manner, inflaming the situation, receives a technical foul. And this is where at the end, where I could have, had I seen more, I could have written a better, more complete report. But this is an example of what Jim said. And you know what? In for a dime, in for a dollar. I write, while free throws are being attempted and number 33 is sitting in the bench area, he yells, why don't you call a fucking technical foul against them? And number 33 then receives his third technical foul for unsportsmanlike conduct. Write it out write it as it happened. But you don't see me sitting there, or you don't see in my report, I think the coach was trying to do this, or I think, I try to keep subjectiveness out of the report as much as you possibly can.
Write what you saw and what you heard.
Yep. And this is the other thing that I have to foot stomp home, and Jim, I'm sure you would do the same thing. Situations that call for a report, ejections, flagrant fouls, anything like that, it is non-negotiable. Fill out the report. And then follow up with what you submitted to the MHSAA. Follow up and copy that with the assigner and the athletic directors, if you can get their contact information, and just say, here's a report from the game. My partner, John Doe, and I officiated on such and such date at such and such time between such and such teams. This is a copy of the report that was submitted to the MHSAA. Let me know if you need any further follow-up. And Jim, real quickly, when this happens that night, what should be your notification? Who do you call first after the game?
Well, probably the first thing you should do is call your assigner and let them know this happened. Because you want to get to the assigner before the coach calls them or the AD calls the assigner. You might not get a hold of them because, they have a lot of people calling and complaining at night, usually, coaches or ADs griping, but call the assigner right away. Sit down and write the report soon after while everything's fresh in your memory. I've even, I had, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, a bench clearing fight at Warren Lincoln. And we ended the game early because everyone left the bench. There was no one left to play. The coach at the time, if the coaches left the bench, the rule was they were ejected. So all the coaches left the bench. We had no one left to play the game, and it would be silly.
Updated.
Yeah. So I sat down in the locker room with my crew and pulled out a pen and wrote down, what I was going to put into the report later when I had the actual report form in front of me. This was before it was all available online. You actually had to,
So follow-up question, Jim, in the chat box is how long do you have to submit the report? And does the referee submit the report, or the official who called the flagrant foul or the double tech or whatever the situation?
It's supposed to be the referee that does it. That doesn't always have to be the case. It's a curse of me being a lawyer that I've had partners just say, well, you're good with words, you write the report. And I'm like, gee, thanks. You're the referee and you're the one that, ejected the guy, but you're having me write the report, thanks. But the referee is supposed to write it. It should be by the close of business the next day. I don't remember exactly what the MHSAA specifies, but you want to get it in because there is, if there is an ejection, there's a suspension the next game. So the MHSAA wants it so we can contact the school and let them know this player is ineligible for the next game. So
and sometimes that game can be the next day.
It's a good idea to do it that night
while it's fresh in your head.
While it's fresh. Yeah. It used to be, well, you still also should call the next call. Really, the morning after probably should be to the AD of a school who had a player or coach ejected, to let them know, hey, your coach was ejected, your player was ejected last night's game. You should be getting the report, through the MHSAA.
Yep.
And, sometimes that AD will want to argue with you about it. Most of them are pretty helpful.
Yep.
I had a football ejection this year. And, the AD of the school with the ejected player called me to talk about it and, talked about what he saw on film and, just wanted to know, what the reason was that for the ejection. And really the reason for his call was the referee on this game, got it wrong in his report. And it didn't make sense to the AD, but he had a call and a nice, friendly chat, and
you just clarify.
Entirely supportive.
Yeah. And so other times where if I was the one in the situation, but I wasn't the owner of the game, I might write up the words and give it to the referee to submit and edit and then make it official. Now, Jim, we are running a little bit long. I was thinking we might have had time to kind of walk through when an actual fight occurs on the court, but we might have to leave that for another day. But for everybody who's watching online afterwards and everybody who's still on, I want to just point out these other two tools real quickly. So again, you're on our homepage, you go to basketball, you click fights, and this one, look at it. It's still accurate and it's still relevant. And what it really does is it walks you through multiple scenarios where you have two people fighting on the court. How do you adjudicate it? And then it goes all the way down to what happens when people start to come off the bench? Who gets ejected? Who doesn't? Who gets a flagrant foul? How many? If you have an uneven number of flagrant fouls, you have 3 on one school and 2 on the other. How do you apply that? And then it goes everywhere to what happens if you just have everybody, on the court. And I really encourage you to walk through it. It's only 12 slides. You think it's not that long, but really absorb it, because again, given that video I just showed you, that wasn't a fight. It could have been, but it wasn't. But I was not in the right frame of mind. And when these situations occur, you might not ever have one of these in your career, but when you do, you're going to want to have gone through it in your head. You are going to want to have trained, because there's going to be so much happening and your brain's going to be spinning. You're not going to want to have to say, oh, wait, what's the rule? The only thing you're going to want to have to do is record what you saw. And so I really strongly encourage you that on your own, go through these scenarios for different fights and different scenarios. And the other last bit I want to just kind of throw out, and what I'll do is I can put it in a follow-up email, is A Better Official, the YouTube channel. A Better Official, he has lots of wonderful high school focused rule videos. And if you go to A Better Official on YouTube and you look up fights on his page, he has some wonderful scenarios where he breaks it down of actual fights on courts and how to administer those situations. And I'll follow up in that in email after the recording of this meeting. So look at this, look at these tools, learn how to write a report if you've never written it. Always write a report when there's an ejection or scenarios, or when you think it's warranted to have to submit a report. It's never okay not to submit a report just because, oh, I'll talk to the coach about that later. We're buddies. You got to get it on record and do the right thing. With that said, I'm going to stop sharing. Again, we're a little over time. I apologize for that, but I think it was a good conversation. I'm going to pause if anybody has any questions for that or any other situations or scenarios.
Jim, I got a question on the report itself. I thought now that it's an electronic piece, that when you hit save, that automatically went to the ADs of both schools in addition to the MSHA.
Well, it goes to the MHSAA, and whether how quickly it gets to the ADs, I don't know. The MHSAA will get it to them.
Okay.
But it's still good practice to call the AD.
It's a
and especially if you can't get that report out right away.
Well, I remember back in the olden days when we had to write it and mail it in or fax it over to the
Yeah.
school and all that stuff. So yeah, okay, very good.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's better to get to the AD before his coach does, because the coach will color the view of it. I remember my first ejection was years ago. Some coach from one of the Livonia schools, and I remember calling the AD, and he started arguing with me about it because he had only heard what the coach had to say, acting like it was my fault. And fortunately, the report came out, and the AD, it was out at Lakeland High, and the AD at Lakeland, and the assistant principal, backed me 100% and backed down. And just out of humor, one of the kids on that Livonia team became an official and was working a JV game in front of me. And this is 6-7 years later. He goes, you ejected our coach that one game, back at Lakeland High, didn't you? Yeah, that was me. And he goes, best thing that ever happened to us. You know, we hadn't won a game till he was gone. And then when he was gone, we won and started playing well, and they fired him after the year was over. So, you know,
You never know. And that's why I said up front, technical fouls, intentional fouls, flagrant fouls, know the rules, know the definitions, know how they're written, know when it's a tech, when it's intentional, when it's a flagrant. And when it happens, call it like you see it. You can try to prevent it, but you can't prevent them all. And when they occur, just apply the rules. And it is what it is, and then write the report later. It's not always easy, but it is that simple. All right, Jim, you got any closing words or anything for the good of the group?
you know, just heads up for the next few weeks, because you know, what's happened now is there are very few games that mean anything in the standings. And you know, as Shane said at the beginning, tempers are short, and you get now players who haven't gotten to play much are getting into the games because they don't mean as much. And until you get to about a week before the tournament, unless you have teams who are playing, you know, who still have a chance to win their league, and that might be 10% of the games. The other 90%, you know, a lot of people just trying to, you know, be macho out there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, all right, everyone, as always, this year more than any, thanks for being part of the fraternity / sorority, and finish strong. We have another meeting at the end of February, just kind of a touch up before we jump into the playoffs for those of us who are working the playoffs. Thanks for staying with us for the full hour and a half. Look at those tools, and we appreciate y'all. Have a good one.